Hello and welcome to Cut Through the Noise with me, Aisling O'Rourke. This is the podcast that helps increase your sales through elevated communications and marketing. You're listening to season 7 of the podcast, so if you've been listening all along, thank you so much for your loyalty. And if you're new here, don't forget to check out our back catalogue of episodes on your preferred podcast app. Here, we don't just talk theory, we offer actionable advice on how you can improve your communications and marketing strategy in order to grow your business. In today's episode, I was delighted to be joined by Gina London. Gina is an expert in leadership communications and is also a former CNN anchor. As an American who's made her home in Ireland, I was excited to speak with Gina about doing business in America and in particular, what Irish business people should know about communicating with a different culture. I hope you enjoy our conversation and that it offers some key insights, particularly if you're looking to deal abroad. Gina, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
You're absolutely very welcome, Aisling. It's great to be here.
Now, Gina, I know that it is a challenging time politically when it comes to, well, living in the United States of America, I imagine, but particularly in dealing with America. And there's a lot of uncertainty around that. But let's not get into the politics of it, because that's for perhaps another show and another day. Talk to me about the communication differences between how we talk in business in Ireland and indeed versus the conversation style in the United States of America.
Okay, thanks for that. It's an interesting question and one I am very familiar with, having worked with Irish companies for almost 10 years now, Irish-based companies, but internationally trading, as well as a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered in the United States, but of course have European and global offices and branches all around the world. I was in the Middle East 2 weeks ago. I'm going to be in Switzerland next week. So the idea that your cultural awareness is critical when you're trying to make connections, when you're trying to make persuasions, or you're trying to influence, and the missteps you can make when you're communicating, if you don't pay attention to that in your preparation, your strategy, can lead to a lot of unnecessary time on the backside trying to mop up or trying to clarify those types of things. So first and foremost, what are those stereotypes? Be aware of them. Be aware if you have blind spots. From an American point of view, the world doesn't center around you. If you are going to be a representative multinationally to employees or potential new business partners in Ireland, but in any other country, take some time to try to understand or try to cultivate your curiosity around the culture. Don't presume everybody speaks the same way that you do, uses slang the way that you do. Don't require some person to be on the back foot of that. Likewise, so what's an example? American football. It's American football outside of the United States. In the United States, it's just football. But outside of the United States, football is soccer. So be delicate and be caring, I think, is very important. Now, from an Irish context, I have watched Irish business leaders in Spain, for example, or maybe they would go to the United States, refer to GAA or even the GA. Nobody outside of Ireland, largely, unless it's the Irish diaspora, has any understanding that that's the Gaelic Athletic Association, what hurling is, what football is in that context, GAA football. They would not know. So watch, not just sporting analogies, of course, but watch your awareness, watch your tonality. Americans can be very direct. They can use phrases that others in Ireland might think are cliche. Like the first time I said something was awesome, they say, oh yeah, everything's awesome. So watch that. Likewise, if I'm trying, though, as an American living in Ireland now, where I have for almost 10 years, if I would say something like, oh, it's grand, I've been pushed back on that, said, no, even though I'm trying to assimilate, that doesn't suit me, I've been told. So there's a balance there. And these things aren't going to potentially absolutely disrupt the apple cart with your relationships, but it can delay that, or it can reduce the acceleration that you're hoping for the success. So I would say, first and foremost, be aware of your stereotypes, try to go around those stereotypes, cultivate your curiosity of the others, and be interested. Try the food. Don't discount everything. Be open to new experiences in a business context, because I think that relationship that you're building purposely will ultimately lead to that business success you're trying to achieve.
And I think it's about, like, in all our communications, in any messaging we're putting out into the world, or like if it's preparing for a keynote speech or a video on social media, you have to create it for the audience. And you have to bring that into those boardroom conversations, even if it's just one to one, because we can't make assumptions. We have to be really conscious of who we're speaking to and what they bring to the table. And as you say, have that open mindset. Something that is perhaps a stereotype about American business people in particular is that they're all very confident, they're all very direct. And if we're pitching an idea to them, we have to have our almost a bombastic version of ourselves ready to go. Is that accurate?
Let me park the word bombastic for a moment because of what's in the White House right now. But let me go and talk about a quick methodology that I think can help people prepare. And this is something I use with all my clients. It's 3 letters: AIM, audience, intent, message, in that order for a reason. So building on what you just said, Aisling, think about who your audience is. Think about the goal, the intent, the action it is specifically that you want them to take. You might be overselling if you're really trying to get a rapport building or a discovery conversation or an agreement to have a second meeting. So a lot of times people try to do too much, and then the receiver is left to infer what decision they should make, and then often don't make any decision at all. Finally, then, to your point, that message should be customized to that person, that audience, that group. The way that an Irish team might present to an American financial institution would be different than how they might be presenting to an angel investor that they might have a personal relationship with, or someone that they're going to be bringing on board as a team member or another manager. So again, your audience, your intent, your message needs to be very scripted, not overly scripted, but in a way that you can really think about how you can land powerful phrases, bombastic. If you think that's going to land, it might be off-putting to an American, because people are people and individuals within that stereotype, the same way that something that's too soft might also not land. So you have to think about, are you clear? Are you concise? Do you have a story? Are you compelling? And that strategy, and then how you structure, and then how you deliver to create an experience that is connecting and is compelling and is credible. That, I think, combination is what you should really be thinking about, not just the information, but the experience that you're creating, dependent upon who that audience is.
Talk to me about storytelling. Like, let's be honest about it. You and I, we work in the world of storytelling, but storytelling has been around under a variety of titles, like since the time of Caesar, when he was trying to convince his soldiers to go to war on his behalf. It's not a new concept, but it has become very trendy in business communication circles in the past 5 or 6 years. If we are going to America and wanting to pitch to an American audience, is it an expectation that you will include that in your communication style?
I think yes, but I think the degree and length to which that story goes is, again, dependent upon the audience. Yes, you're right. One of my favorite authors, Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, among a number of other books, talks about how storytelling is what defines us as humans. So stories that you can connect to the proof points of your product or your service are essential. And yet crafting that story, and this is where I used to joke when I first moved here to Ireland, and people would say, oh, we're a nation of storytellers. And I would push back and say, yes, but stories have a beginning and a middle and an end. There are some wonderful stories in Ireland that you can find never seem to reach a conclusion. And the most important part in business storytelling, and a story doesn't have to be a yarn. It doesn't have to be a novel that you're bringing to life audibly, but it does have to have a scene, a friction, a challenge, an outcome that could be positive or disappointing, because lessons learned are also really powerful when you're connecting. And the most important part of all that's often lost in storytelling in a business context is why it matters to the audience. Do not leave that so what question unanswered. You're not telling a story for the sake of telling a story. You're telling a story to connect the point you're trying to make to relevance to the audience. What does it mean to them? How is it going to change their life by partnering with you or investing in you or whatever it is you're wanting to achieve? Remember, you've identified your intent very clearly, right? So I do love the idea of here's the information that you want to convey. And you look then with your team, or you've given a bit of an analysis. Where can I open up and insert an example? A colorful conversation, a little bit of a so what story. Those are all stories. I've had clients say, I don't have any stories. I don't know what stories are. Stories can be just that little example. So if you lead with, here's our proof point, here's whatever. For instance, that can be a nice, easy segue into your story. And make sure, though, that your story has that final part that connects it back to why you just took a moment to share that. A story can be 2 sentences. A story can be 20 minutes. But the most important element of it is that you've put it through the process of who's my audience? Why am I telling the story? Will it resonate with them?
And that conclusion, and that's so what you have to bring them on the journey with you. It's vital when you're trying to really elevate that relationship with fellow entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you don't have a way to continue to connect with your audience throughout a pitch or throughout a one-on-one or an update, whatever it is, your audience, even if they're looking at you, their brain is going somewhere else. Other thoughts are coming in. They're rehashing the argument they had with their spouse or their significant other or another colleague, but they are unlikely to be sticking with you if you are droning on and on. So think about when we talk about communications, it's not just your information. As I said before, it's the experience you're creating. I will say that my experience around Irish in general tendencies are banter, colorful, vivid expressions, and even the most normal interaction that I find really compelling. So I would certainly say, from a recommendation as an American hearing Irish people, lean into that. Not overly twee. I'm not talking about that. And that twee word, by the way, people don't even know what that means in the US. That's very much of an Irish self-comment about themselves. But yes, I would say stop short of the flat cap everything, but do lean into the spirit of Ireland. And there is significant spirit there to be compelling. There is an absolute tendency of Americans to be thinking about, as we all know, and I agree with this, do I have an Irish background? The allure of the myth of Ireland, if I've never been there, the imagining of things. And don't discourage that, I think. Leverage that, because that actually is a wonderful calling card that not every country enjoys. And it's been said before, but it is worth reminding that that's an advantage you have right away, is that I'm from Ireland, that surname, last name, as we would say, those things that make you different and give an actual connotation right away of positivity. Not every country has that. And I think that's something to be really reassured or be reassuring for your Irish listeners, that is something that for most Americans right away, the word Ireland makes them smile.
That is lovely to hear. And I think it's important to recognize in this era of uncertainty, because I think people are quite concerned and they want to continue that positive relationship. No one wants to see that disappear. So it is heartening to hear that from yourself. Talk to me about decision making. So is there a difference in speed and in the turnaround of decisions between Irish and American businesses?
In general, there can be a thought, that there can be a what's the word I want? There can be, I think, an overarching tendency in the States to, I don't want to Elon Musk it here, but the idea of run fast, go fast and break things, fail fast is something that you hear a lot of, not just in the States, but in maybe multinational agile companies now. So that could be a trend across the globe, in fact. But I think what's important, and I think what Irish businesses can also really lean into and leverage, is my experience in go fast and break things mentality in companies. If it is not with care and compassion to your teams, leads to lower productivity, higher turnover, and ultimately not achieving the goals long term that you may be setting out. So I will go political for a second. What you're seeing right now in the federal government, in the workforce, these emails that are being sent without any kind of thought about how it's landing with the employees. Tell me 5 things that you did this week to substantiate your employment. That is creating an incredible uncertainty, resentment, distrust, morale plummeting. If you don't thread on compassion and care and nurturing of your employees, there will be a fallout on the other side. There will be a backlash on the other side. We've seen it time and time again. You can still, as a company, change things. You can still make quick decisions, but your prep time needs to be aligned with that. I've worked alongside a lot of strategic plans of organizations to make sure that that communication plan is right along the side and not in that final position. If you put it in the final position, you are missing chances to buy in, to get feedback along the way, to change and mold and adjust your communications, to get that rationale. And it doesn't necessarily drag the overarching strategy and the change. In fact, it actually makes it more successful and accelerates the impact you want to make or the efficiencies you're striving for in the final game. And I think that is a big disconnect about somebody who has a lot of power and leadership by right, which we're seeing out of the White House right now. We can just do it, so we are. That there's becoming more and more of a groundswell of resistance on that. So sure, make some quick decisions, but also have your culture in place, have your alliances already built in, have your champions already built in. I think the more cultural, and this is overgeneralization alert too, but the more cultural, the more caring, the more family oriented impressions that I get from an Irish context is spelled out in the way that there's the longevity of tenure and the morale and the loyalty that you see in a lot of these organizations. And that's a distinction that I think should be aspirational for any organization.
So then if you are, like, if your culture in your company is that bit slower when it comes to decision making than the counterpart in America or even in another culture elsewhere, it's about communicating. Well, actually, you know what? We'd like to take a bit of time to think this through, because in our experience, that process of thinking it through before we give the final sign off, that actually works better productivity wise and morale wise for our staff. As long as you're communicating the why you want to do things at a slower pace, then you're more likely to have that successful relationship.
Absolutely. I talk about the what plus the aspirational why on any messaging. It's not just what you want to get done. It's why is this going to be better for our customers, our clients, our colleagues, our workforce. And when you can bring people along on a vision, and it doesn't take a lot, which is actually something I think it's fundamental to be aware from an American standpoint or any context in Ireland or what have you. People want to feel like they're a part of something. They would probably all be giving great ideas in the US about how to make things more efficient if they'd been given a little bit of time to organize around this, rather than this complete cull mentality that's happening there right now. The idea that you can go slow to move fast, and there's books written with that very title. And it's essential, I think, for anyone to remember that your foundational culture that you bring and that you cultivate will allow you then to be more innovative, more agile, more quick in your decision making, because you have that speak up culture. You have that recognition culture. And that is a multiplier approach. No matter what your country land is, that will be ultimately more successful in the long run.
Finally, then, Gina, if you would have one piece of advice for Irish entrepreneurs who are looking to break into the American market, what kind of research should they be doing when it comes to pitching themselves? How do you get yourself started on really having that excellent communications and relationship then with an American company, perhaps, if you're starting out?
Practice out loud. There's no substitute for skilling up your ability to communicate by actioning it. If you're thinking, if you're writing, if you're putting things through ChatGPT, if you've got all your business documents ready to go, or you've got your pitch decks ready to go, and then you pick up that phone or you go on that first Zoom call and you've never rehearsed any of this out loud. And this goes for any culture, not just in Irish. But since we're talking to this market, please rehearse out loud. Your opening line, your impression is setting that tone right away about, do I trust this person? Is this person credible? Do they have some authority? Do they also have some warmth? Do I want to have a rapport or connection with that person? And it's not because you're being fake. It's because you care enough to cultivate this sense of who you are. I'm coming out with a book later this year, hopefully by May 1st, called The Amplify Approach. And I think it's critical for us to human up no matter where we're from, because AI is going to be substituting for so much of the written work that we're doing, the research, the analysis, the reports, those types of things. But our human to human connections have never been more critical. And for those of you who are not taking opportunities to go into, how do I look, not physical beauty, but do I look engaged? Do I look interested? Do I look that I'm engaged with the words I'm saying? Do I know how to power up my voice to be clear and understood if my first call is a virtual call? And that's the number one sense that is coming through. And these are developable skills like anything else. All the technical skills, those are probably going to be replaced in the near future by machine learning and other things. So this human version of how you connect, it's essential, it's critical. And the number one thing I would say, practice out loud. You wouldn't go play the piano for the first time in a concert hall if you never put your keys on the keyboard. So why would you limit your ability to sound clearer, to sound more captivating, to sound more credible about the topic you're talking about with your business, if the first time that you're speaking out loud about it is when you're in that high stakes meeting? Doesn't make sense. Please practice out loud. You don't rise to the level of the occasion. You fall to your level of practice.
Gina and I both come from a broadcasting background, and I cannot emphasize how important that practicing piece is. And like, I was speaking with a client last night who's a basketball coach, and in his part-time life, and he's in the accountancy sector in the daytime. And I was talking to him about the importance of practicing his speaking for team meetings, and saying, like, if you want to be a good basketball player, you can't shoot hoops in your head. You have to physically go and shoot the hoop. So it's the exact same thing. Whether it's a presentation or a script for a video, you've got to practice it out loud. Well, Gina, it has been an absolute pleasure to get the opportunity to speak with you. Of course, we're both going to advise business leaders to get help with their communications if you really want to elevate your brand and your company. How can people find out more about you? And Gina, keep an eye out for that new book in the summer.
Thank you so much for that opportunity to share. GinaLondon.com. Find me on my website. Of course, got that contact interest form for you to fill out. Also, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm also active on Instagram. I do respond to any messages that come through on any platform, wherever you're getting your social media. I'm dipping my toe into Blue Sky, not super active there. I'm on Twitter, but it's so toxic these days, it's hard. So my website, GinaLondon.com, LinkedIn or Instagram would probably be my three top places. But do find someone that can be a good sounding board for you. It's one thing to practice. It's also another thing to practice with an expert who can help you reassure yourself around the things that you're already doing great, that are connecting, and also give you that little fine tuning that is going to help you feel more confident and more comfortable when you're connecting.
Well, Gina London, thank you so much for joining us on Cut Through the Noise. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Gina, and I hope you found the episode helpful. My key takeaways center on ensuring that you're not making any assumptions around the culture you're about to enter into, particularly as an Irish entrepreneur looking to do business in America. You have to do your research about the culture in the company or community that you want to go into, and then go in with an open mind. Secondly, practice, practice, practice. The success of your pitch will live or die on the amount of effort you put into preparing for it. Thirdly, lean into your Irishness and craft a compelling story. It's not about paddywhackery. No, instead, it's about using tried and tested storytelling techniques to make sure that your communications have a lasting impact. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Gina London. If you'd like help with your communications, please feel free to get in contact. Drop me a line to hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie, and don't worry if you don't have a pen handy. All the links will be in the show notes below this episode on your preferred podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a review or rating depending on which app you're using. It all helps to spread the word about Cut Through the Noise. We'll be back next week with another episode of Cut Through the Noise with me, Aisling O'Rourke. But in the meantime, remember that creating great communications takes time and effort. And while content may well be king in 2025, clarity is key if you want to stand out from the crowd and cut through the noise.